Its name was Mormo. That is the title of this 2024 found footage movie, directed, starring, produced, edited by Mark Andrew Bowers. It is a low budget movie, around 5,000 euros reportedly. Yes, euros. So this was actually filmed in Cyprus, although it is English language. So this focuses on three people, a couple and their young sort of daughter, toddler, around 3 or 4, I suppose. And the creators of this movie are actually the characters in the movie. So this is a real life couple with their daughter and even the family dog. So the story is that we have this kind of young family living in Cyprus, and they are out one day and they discover this kind of area where there are these seemingly ancient ruins. So they go and have a little bit of an investigate. The dog's a bit apprehensive and things like this, and they discover this kind of small chest, and they take it home, and it's filled with a few different things, but partially it's filled with these coins, which look like they date back to the days of the Knights Templar. And ever since this point, there seems to be strange happenings in this house, and the daughter seems to be conversing with this Mormo, this sort of entity, and obviously it's freaking everyone out. And it seems to be affecting the family in sort of different ways depending on who it is. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So yes, this is a lower budget movie, and I believe the first feature from this family, this creative team. So let's talk about what works. So this is a found footage movie in a very traditional sense in some ways, but there are some things I think this movie does avoid, some pitfalls at least, in a lot of found footage movies that have done before. One of these is constant arguing. There's a little bit, but really not very much at all. One of the kind of annoyances I have with found footage movies is the need to have constant arguing through the movie, with characters complaining, bitching at each other, having a go at each other, and I just feel like it's a way to try and add drama to fill out the kind of runtime, and it just seems so cliched. And I guess people would be tenting things, but in this movie, because we have an actual family more or less playing fictitious versions of themselves, they act very much like a family, and they don't really have these sort of blazing rows that you'll get in a lot of kind of found footage, which is a nice change, I have to say. So they kind of act a little bit more mature, perhaps, than a lot of characters in previous kind of found footage movies. And despite the fact this is obviously somewhat of an amateur movie in some respects, and their first foray into filmmaking, I didn't think the acting was actually all that bad. Now, it's probably somewhat easy acting as more or less yourself with your actual wife and your actual daughter, but nonetheless, how it comes across on screen, I've got to say, I think was fine. But I will say especially impressive was the young girl. Now, I was thinking while I was watching this, because I didn't realise first of all that they were a family, but it started to dawn on me that they must be, and I had a look and they are. Because this young girl, she's so young, she just wouldn't understand acting, if you see what I mean. And what she was kind of, how she was interacting and some of the things they kind of got her to say and do, I thought, wow, that's really impressive for someone so young, and considering, again, this is such a lower budget movie. So I have to say, I think the daughter actually comes across as very, very good, because she's sort of talking about the monster under her bed and things like this, and yeah, she's obviously talking to her real parents, but regardless, it's when you're watching it on screen, I think it does come across very well, and I think, wow, she actually feels like this is the real daughter, which of course she is. But yeah, so that was all pretty good. Now the movie is very low budget, so don't be expecting a hell of a lot on screen in regards to visual scares, But, and we'll come on back onto that. But what you do get is a fairly good substitute in regards to some of the audio effects here, which they primarily use to be the kind of scary thing. You know, we have this dark sort of house a lot of the time, and this it's somewhat isolated to a degree, and we get these kind of sort of audio effects and groans and growls and things like this and spooky sounds, and it does do a good job of seeming, you know, dangerous, ominous, threatening, supernatural. So I think the actual use here of Foley mixing, audio effects, how you want to kind of say it, I think is pretty strong. Now, if you're not a fan of lots of shaky cam, parts of this movie actually tend to use security cameras. So the cameras, a lot of the time, are actually quite static. There is some shaky cam in it, but yeah, there is a mix of that and kind of security cameras and handheld cameras. So we do get some variety in different camera shots. And the way this movie is presented, it's kind of like someone is reviewing the police. So we see like police files. So we see sort of a few photographs and someone's kind of narrating partially through the, you know, at points in the movie, looking at different kind of video files and things like this. And one other small point that I mentioned, this was obviously filmed over a period of time, because you kind of, and it's the way you actually experience this time is the growth of the dog and the child, because you sort of see them grow as the film goes on. So I presume it was probably filmed in sequence. And as the film gets sort of on, you think, you know, as the dog gets a little bigger and things like this, I think, so you do get a sense of, you know, an amount of kind of time is elapsing. So that, again, that was a good way of doing it without having, you know, 2 months later or something like that. So there is some kind of subtlety in this filmmaking. So there you go. However, that is a double-edged sword, because let's talk about that subtlety, because perhaps this movie is a little too subtle in regard to horror elements. Okay, so this movie is one of those found footage movies where you really don't see anything. Now, this is probably down to the budget. So they obviously don't have a huge budget to do VFX, things like that, set pieces, which is why they've relied on sound. But do you as a viewer care about how much money they had to make this movie? Probably not. You just want to be entertained. So the reality is, as a viewer, this movie isn't particularly visually interesting. It's a lot of cameras looking around in the dark and some spooky sounds. You'll get an occasional bit of like things like moving on their own, but that's kind of it, really. You know, a few shadows, but there's not a lot here in regards to anything visually stimulating, to be honest with you. So, you know, there's that. And to couple with that, I'm going to be honest with you, I think the main criticism I have of this movie is it's just a bit dull. So why I say this is the movie is kind of predictable in regards to its plot, its overall plot. There are some things here, and I'll come on to a little bit more detail in a minute, about where the plot you just think, this seems like either people haven't done things or have done things that just seem silly. The decision here to have somewhat minimal dialogue. I mean, there is dialogue in it, but this isn't like a movie where there's a lot of conversations between our characters. Now, there's only two adult characters at least, but there's a lot of like dead air. There's a lot of kind of just looking at like a room. Now, I know sort of Paranormal Activity popularised this to a degree, but in this movie, I have to say, you feel like that you're just like watching a security camera with nothing really happening or very little happening a lot of the time, and things like that. And even when we're on our kind of you know, handy cams and things, again, there's a lot of things not happening really on screen. So the movie is there's nothing visually exciting that happens on screen, and the pacing of it is quite slow. The other thing, as I've kind of alluded to, I think sometimes, although I think the character interactions seem naturalistic because they are the characters they are portraying on screen to a degree, or at least fictionalized versions of them. But nonetheless, I kept on thinking I have some sort of issues in regards to questions that aren't answered. So this is I think the father is like American and the mum is like Colombian. They both speak English. They're living in Cyprus, but they say they can't speak the language, and they have no network of people they can talk to. So what are they doing there? I mean, why are they there? I mean, what do they do for work? We never ever see anyone like go to work or anything like that. So I was like, that's the first question: is why are they there? They can't speak the language. They don't know anyone, and they don't seem to work. What are they doing in Cyprus? Because they're clearly not nationals of that country. So that's the first thing. And then the way they kind of randomly stumble over this ruins, I don't know, it seemed a little convoluted to me. But whatever, maybe you can kind of forgive that. So they pick up this box of artifacts, this little chest, which has got all these coins in. But they don't do anything with it. It just sits on their desk. I mean, if you found a bunch of like antique coins, surely you would have them appraised or valued or sell them or something. But no, they just sit on. They don't even talk about really. They say once I think that they could be valuable, but that's basically it. There's no like, oh, we'll do this, that, and the other with it. They're just going to sit there. I mean, they're not like collectors or anything. It just sort of sits there. Surely, if you find something like that, you would probably at least get it appraised or something like that. But no. And then, obviously, this kind of chest is clearly the cause of all this kind of paranormal activity. And there's very, they all this stuff starts to happen, but they don't really seem to. So hang on a second, could it be this ancient thing that I've uncovered? I mean, yeah, you might not think it's supernatural first of all, but obviously you've got to think about the timing and stuff, or at least, if you don't want to just throw it or take it back, sell it, get rid of it. Yeah, and it just seems to be like they want to keep it around, or they don't want to call for help with the police or anything like that. And I get that they don't speak the language, but, surely that they'll still be able to commune with, like, the authorities and things. And even when there's, like, seemingly imminent danger, they still don't really take any kind of, like, action. They don't really kind of are proactive with trying to, deal with the situation, essentially. And then, mild spoiler, we have a scene sort of, or a sequence towards the end of the third act where the daughter kind of wanders off, and then the husband's like walking around in the dark with a shotgun. I'm thinking, the risk of you shooting your own daughter in this sequence, in the film obviously, I'm thinking, you're jumpy, I mean, I get he's stressed because he's been sort of manipulated by this supernatural force, but, I mean, I don't know, there's just some silly things that happen here. Now, I've often said in reviews that the issue sometimes you get when it tends to be one person who is the creative force behind these lower budget movies is there's no one to kind of push back on. I'm sure his wife was like, yes, darling, it's all wonderful, it's all great. But, this is why you really need a producer who is kind of like going to push back and say, well, maybe you should, consider doing this, that, and the other. And it so often happens with these lower budget movies where there is this one person who is controlling all of the decisions. Ask for criticism, Ask for criticism. It's a strength, not a weakness. So overall, how does the movie shake out? I think if you enjoy a slower burn movie, and boy, let me just emphasise this is a slow movie, then you might like the kind of the creepy build up and the more of the kind of like the what's going on in the shadow type feel. But ultimately, I feel this movie is a little unsatisfying and ultimately a little dull. I will give this one a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Please do leave me a comment and I shall look forward to you next time. Bye for now.